Hi, folks. With Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about algorithm-driven pricing, dynamic pricing, spot pricing. Call it what you like, but goods and services typically had a fixed price. Any retailer or purveyor of goods, certainly at the mass merchandise level, had to have an agreed price. There had to be a price ticket there. There had to be clearly advertised price. If something was in the a product promotional brochure that was put around into your letterbox or something, you went into the shop and it was advertised for $1 and it was $2, then there'd be all hell would break loose, and there are various government run consumer organizations that would rush in to go and find these people and hold them accountable for predatory pricing, all these sorts of things. And as part of the wider sort of antitrust, as it's called, legislation that you see in the United States, or consumer competition policy type thing, where companies can't buy each other up and then start a monopoly and charge what they want, and so on. So, and certainly in the post-war era and in the 1950s and 1960s, you pretty much look at any policy paper and it suggests if you want to raise the standard of living of people and have high social trust, as in consumer social trust in particular, you need to have clear pricing of goods and services, avoid predatory pricing. There has to be a lot of market competition and so on. And this is how you raise the standard of living of people in the West, and how you increase social trust. That was then. Of course, now it's fairly different. You've noticed that, excuse me, that whereas the technical means didn't really exist back in the day, today it does. There can be instant spot pricing, day to day, minute by minute, hour by hour type spot pricing on all sorts of goods and services. And this is not just simply in say Airbnb or something like that, but in across the board, even in national grocery chains and so on. So I'll talk a little bit about that, because I think it's a bigger issue, and it's going to be a bigger issue because it directly affects our standard of living. Further erodes social trust, which is already on a sharp downward trend due to mass migration of third world peasants, who pretty much all of whom hate us and hate West. The hate West, just want to loot the riches that we have, that they had no hand in building up. So now I mentioned Airbnb. Airbnb have a dynamic pricing model, whereas demand increases. More people are logging on, making inquiries. More people are booking Airbnbs. That the price keeps on increasing as long as the demand is increasing. I don't know how tight the algorithm really is, because it's a black box in the background, so you can't really prove one way or another. But it's supposed to work that as demand increases, the price increases. So at a time of low demand, there's a floor price, an advertised price that it's, I'll use round numbers here to illustrate the point. It's $100 a night to stay at this Airbnb place, but it can go up to, in terms of higher demand, $160 a night to stay in the same place. But there's a floor price. So it's not dynamic in all directions. If there's no demand, the price doesn't drop to $10 a night. So there's a minimum price. So there's only an upward pressure that can be applied on pricing, not a downward pressure. Now, from the high point of 160, which is supposedly demand created by algorithms that are putting that price up, it can come back down to 100, but that's the floor. So it's not a fair representation of demand at all. Again, there's a floor price and only upward pressure that's algorithm determined. So you can quite easily look at I've done it. Look at you want to go away on a couple of days, spend a couple of nights off in the mountains or something like that, and you look at a place and it's $100 a night. You go, oh yeah, and then you go back a few hours later to book it, or maybe the next day to book it, and it's 150, 160, 165 dollars. Go, what? This was $100 when I looked at it yesterday. But this is the effect of this floating spot algorithm-driven dynamic pricing. The same can be for Uber or even taxis now as well. There's certain times of the day and certain demand-driven pricing, so that an Uber can be $20 to get you from here to there, and now it's going to be $70 because there was more demand. And again, when you look at the pricing, you go and check on it. Okay, that's $20 for that journey. You go back an hour or two later, it's $50. Half an hour later, it's $50. Just because the algorithm model said there was a greater demand, therefore you have to pay more. Was there a greater demand? Well, you got no way of checking. Maybe there is, maybe there wasn't. Maybe they just noticed, hey, this guy's back again. Let's see if we can stiff him for a few more bucks. You don't actually know whether this is all happening in background, and so you've got no way of knowing whether the price change has been based on some sort of realistic factor, or they've just made it up, or they're just trying to screw you, or they just say, hey, this is the third time this guy's come back on. He's obviously keen. Let's hit him up for some more money. You just don't know one way or another, but you have to take it as an article of faith and trust. Certainly the investigations, and there's not many of them, the investigations that have been made demonstrate quite clearly the trend is predatory pricing. They're not responding to those algorithms, aren't responding to demand at all. They're just trying to gouge you for a few more bucks. There's no, as I can see, certainly in the ones we investigate, at least, there's no honesty factor in there. And again, we're talking a wider social trust issue. Most of the people doing the screwing, the Chinese and the Indians and so on, not exclusively, but mostly. Now, I noticed this too in say, a national grocery chain, where there was a certain fruit that I bought, and they didn't have the quality of fruit that I wanted on the first day. But I noted the price, came back the next day, and instead of, and again, I'll use round numbers here, instead of $1, the price was $1.30 the very next day. And I thought, wow, that seems to be a big change just in one day. Now, typically the pricing cycles used to be week to week, fortnight to fortnight, that type of thing. But now they're in not every product, but certainly in a significant number of products, it's spot pricing. So the following day I went back and it had gone from $1 to $1.30. Now it's $1.50 for again exactly the same piece of fruit. Now, if there was a notable change in quality or something like that, or then maybe you could say it's related to they had to pay more for this stuff, so that they're charging more. It's not that. It's not that at all. And so I asked the guy who was, he seems to be in charge there. And I thought, what's going to say? And he said, no. And he's quite casual about it. I'm not sure he was bright enough to really understand the wider ramifications, but he said, no, it's algorithm driven now. The demand for, if the relative supply of, so they can choke off, so they can reduce supply of, I'll just pick something out. They can reduce the supply of bananas, so that there's only 100 bananas for sale now in the shop. So instead of putting as many bananas on the shelf as they think they could actually sell at a given price, they've reversed the whole mathematics of this now. So if we reduce the number of bananas, and I'm picking bananas at random, by the way, if we reduce the number of bananas on the shelves, on the fruit, in the fruit and vegetable section, we reduce the number of bananas, then we can calculate people will pay more because of the reduced amount. And therefore, we can now charge them $1.50 instead of $1 because of this reduced demand and because demand has increased. Now, the algorithm may say, well, in times of, say, sunny, bright, warm days, consumption of bananas tends to pick up, just historically. So we can increase the price of bananas by 10% or 20% or whatever, because historically we know over years of data collection that we can actually charge more and get more for selling bananas. So we don't need, if we have a fixed price on it for that week, then we're just limiting our profitable opportunities here. But by using random and dynamic, not random, dynamic spot pricing, we can gouge the customer for a few more bucks without them, really knowing. And so it's algorithm driven. This was also the case in, say, things like they're looking at this is again a national grocery chain. They're looking at the write downs on, say, perishable items like milk and meat or something, those perishable items, and they're looking at the write downs on these and they've calculated that if they've got a certain amount of milk with 3 days shelf life left, this is legal shelf life. It'll the milk will last 3 days beyond the legal limit. But if the shelf life is 3 days, they're going to have to write off 50% of that. Typically, historically, they know that, in the data analytics machines that they're running. So the idea is they can reduce the price by 10% or 15%, and they'll do hourly price changes on the markdown product. It's better you get 80% of the retail price rather than have to throw it all out. Is the thinking on this, which is fair enough. I do get that, but they'll do hourly pricing on this. So someone goes around every hour and reprices these products, so they can reduce the price of the milk or something by 10%. But then they notice demand is picking up on that 10%. So then they'll change it and say, okay, let's just reduce the price, put it back up by 5%, and so on. So again, they're responding to the purchase rate and the supposed or imagined demand for the products that they're marking down, and then put the price back up, stop marking down, or whatever. But these are products they're going to throw out anyway. So this is a dynamic pricing. So one car I noticed recently, some meat, it was reduced from 10, say, for example, again, I'll use round numbers here, reduced from $10 to $5. But that $5 price reduction, which is a lot of stock was being reduced, that $5 price reduction, there was quite a lot of interest and demand. People were buying the meat for $5. So the algorithm comes back saying, no, put it up to $5.50 or make no more reductions. So the idea of algorithm spot-driven pricing across a whole lot of things, particularly a convenience-delivered service like taxis, or even in things like product auctions, even auctions of houses or motor vehicles or other things. They're using a dynamic pricing model. For example, say an auction is supposed to close at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, the auction is closed, but the algorithms driving these, this is online auctions I'm talking about. The algorithm says, okay, they claim there's 50 people that are still watching that product. Let's say a motor vehicle. There are 50 people still watching that product. Therefore, we'll just continue the auction. Okay, no, I know we said the auction finishes at 5 o'clock, but if there's enough people looking, we'll just continue the auction indefinitely if we have to. We can, and we'll do it in cycles, say 15 minutes. So the 5 o'clock auction now goes to 5:15. There's still a lot of people looking. 5:30, still a lot of people. 5:45, still a lot of people looking. 6 o'clock, and so on. Now, whether or not there are those people looking, you don't know. And there's, without doing a thorough audit or legal investigation with subpoenas and all sorts of things, because they won't tell you, which makes it doubly sort of sus that they won't disclose anything, but they claim there's 50 people watching, so we're allowed to keep this auction open. Now, typically they know through number crunching and data analytics that for every extra 15 minutes they keep the auction open, there's another bid comes in, or two bids. So So they can drive the price up by 20-30% just by keeping the auction open, and having other people come in. Now, whether there's 50 people looking, or 5 people, or 3 people, typically when you've got a price chasing on an auction, there's usually 2-3 people at most who are chasing it. 2 typically, and it always plays out this way in physical auctions, not the online ones, but the physical one. I think the online ones would be more or less the same. I don't think there's a whole gaggle of people who are chasing it and bidding. So by playing this card, there's all these people watching, they can artificially engineer outcomes. And this is what I'm talking about here, the artificial engineering of outcomes that are not related to anything factual on the ground. And it requires, a price gouging mentality. But the algorithmic, the number crunching, of data analytics that go into this all across the board, whether it be pricing of anything, it's what's the maximum we can get away with. Not that never happened, but it's not the maximum we can sell. It's not the greatest number of items that we can sell, or the efficiencies we create in the back room, say in manufacturing process and so on. The gouging mentality is, let's reduce the quality of inputs, the quality of materials we use to manufacture the product. Let's try and gouge the customer on a spot basis, and so on and so forth. So this is something that I think is only possible, or the mentality would only exist in a low trust society. And I can't see or can't find any evidence of government crackdowns on this, what I would regard as predatory pricing policies. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.